Hello, welcome to Strictly Money at the News Forum, where all voices matter. I'm Saijal Patel. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has called on the Liberal government to halt raising employment insurance and CPP premiums. Premiums he's dubbed as tax hikes. This comes at a time when soaring inflation is hurting Canada's most vulnerable. And it raises the question, is this a tax or isn't it? Evelyn Jacks is president and CEO of the Knowledge Bureau, and she joins me now. Evelyn, great to have you back.
Nice to be back. Thanks for having me today.
So there's been a lot of debate about this. You know, on one side, pundits are saying this isn't a tax because EI and CPP premiums provide a direct benefit to Canadians. And on the other side of the argument is that no, not everyone does benefit, and this is levied by the government to fund government programs. And so by definition, it's a tax. Where do you stand?
It is a tax. In fact, it is one of a number of taxes. Payroll taxes, by definition, are mandatory requirements, first of all, by employers. In fact, employers have quite steep penalties for not deducting and remitting payroll taxes to the government. In addition, employees do not get full deductions for the amounts that are contributed. And as you say, they're not guaranteed. There are a number of issues with regard to qualifying for both Canada Pension Plan and EI. The OECD, in fact, counts it as part of their tax wedge calculation, which is an interesting report. Canadians actually pay higher payroll taxes than many of the 38 OECD countries out there. And so I think the argument really is it's statutory, it's requirement and required, and it's rising. Canada Pension Plan and EI premiums are rising in 2023. And this is coming at a time when, of course, people are grappling with inflation and businesses are reopening under difficult times post-pandemic.
Evelyn, you just mentioned was it a wedge tax? What exactly is that?
Yes, the OECD measures the amount of take-home pay that people get after their deductions for payroll taxes and also their income taxes. And they take into account family benefits that are paid back as well in the case of families. And what is striking is that, first of all, our payroll taxes are on the higher side. When we take into account family benefits, overall we're on the lower side. But for singles in particular, the tax wedge is high in Canada. And the good news is that there's lots that we can do from a tax and financial planning point of view to make sure that we shore up our financial health while we have some of these wonderful societal programs that may be accessible to some of us when, for example, we have disability, retirement, or unemployment in our lives.
Yeah. You know, I mean, EI, we know it serves a purpose, although I would argue, you know, not a lot of people actually collect it, and hopefully you don't. And the same thing, Evelyn, with CPP, right? It's in one way it's for savings, for retirement. But again, in your experience, do we actually get what we pay for?
It's such a good question because it depends on, first of all, your longevity and your health. It also depends on whether you take CPP early or late. It depends on how long you work. For example, it's mandatory to contribute to the CPP, even when you're working until the age of 65. There's some rules around deferring the collection of CPP until the age of 70. And also it depends on your status, whether you're employed or self-employed, because self-employed people actually do contribute to the CPP. They contribute both the employers and the employees' portion when they file their tax returns in the spring. Now, CPP is rising, so if you're paying both portions, you're in the gig economy, it's going to cost you over $8,000. If you're making kind of a middle of the road, $60,000 to $70,000 take-home pay. And that is room that is being squeezed out of making a TFSA contribution, for example.
Yeah.
So, the CPP is not going to fund your whole retirement. The CPP is going to be part of the solution.
I
And I
think
think
that's, yeah, I
that's
think that's an
important.
important point, is that it doesn't fund your entire retirement, and it wasn't ever meant to do that. Hold your thoughts, Evelyn. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Evelyn, before the commercial break, we were talking about CPP premiums and IA premiums, and how EI rather, and that it's going up. And you just made the point in commercial break that they're contributory, right? If you don't pay into it, you're not going to get it back. I want to talk about the timing of this too, Evelyn, because people are struggling, as you mentioned, because of inflation. In fact, nearly half of Canadians said that they are worse off financially than they were a year ago. So this is putting pressure on people's cash flow, whether it's personal or business. And that's kind of really the heart of this, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And from a timing point of view, certainly there have been groups who have lobbied perhaps for a freeze on the increases that we're seeing in the CPP and EI premiums. So we'll have to leave that to government to fight that out. But this is a really important time from a planning point of view to have discipline because we do have, first of all, social programs we've agreed to contribute, CPP and EI. We've decided that that's something we want to do, but they are contributory, as we mentioned. But secondly, there have been so many people displaced out of the workplace, and they have to make sure that they save for their own retirement. So for young people in particular who have compounding time on their side, putting money, tucking it away into a tax-free savings account is so important because it will secure a tax-free retirement for you in the future. So if you're 18, a resident of Canada, and you've got some money that you can put into a TFSA, it's a very important thing to do. But if you don't have money to put into a TFSA and you have RSP contribution room, make your RSP contribution, which will save you money on your taxes. And then that tax refund can go into your TFSA. Doing a little bit is more important than doing, the maximum contribution. Even if you can save a little bit, because of your long compounding time as a young person, you're still going to benefit. Seniors too, if you're taking money out of a RIF, for example, tuck it away into a TFSA, your future retirement is going to be tax-free on those funds in the TFSA.
I know
So we have some
sometimes
very important vehicles here in Canada.
I was just going to say, these are such important tax shelters that sometimes people don't take advantage of. When it
And
comes
that's
to
a great hedge. Sorry, I just want to mention that's a great hedge against inflation because you can really get returns on your investment by saving the tax. And with the TFSA, you can take the money out for emergencies and drop it back in following year and not lose any of that contribution room.
Yeah. Evelyn, the support that both sides of the political party, I guess they have a different vision of supports, right? On one side, the right side or the conservative side, they're looking for tax cuts, and on the liberal side, they're like, well, let's help Canadians through handouts. What are the considerations, I guess, for both approaches, right? Because there's always trade-offs either way.
Yes. Well, there are many considerations. So, for example, as it relates to handouts, social benefits, there is always some auditing. So you have to qualify for it. And currently, we know there's about 1.7 million CERB recipients that are being asked to pay those first $2,000 that they received during the pandemic back. We also know that, as we mentioned, even though we contribute to social benefits, there are clawbacks. There are clawbacks for things like old age security, for Canada Child benefits. And so it's an ecosystem. It kind of works together. I'm not sure that any of the handouts are meant to be permanent, although when we look at Canada Pension Plan, most employees are counting on that Canada Pension Plan to form part of their retirement plan. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's all or nothing. I think we're going to have some opportunity to benefit from some of the social benefits. We have to be aware that as our incomes go up, in some cases, our benefits are going to go down. And certainly, we do have to be responsible for our own future. And to do that, we have to make sure that we have enough after tax dollars left over in order to secure our retirement.
Absolutely. Evelyn, we really appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And we'll have to have you back because this discussion around taxes, it's not going away anytime soon.
It's fascinating too.
It is. It really is. Evelyn Jacks, President and CEO of the Knowledge Bureau. Welcome back to Strictly Money. If you sat across someone who said they were a financial advisor, what would you understand that they were qualified to do? You see, the term financial advisor is vague at best. Some have had rigorous training and have fiduciary duty. Others are there to simply sell you a product and don't need to understand anything about you. And this is exactly why a group of consumer advocates are taking aim at the Ontario government's move to regulate such titles, claiming they've set the bar too low. Jean-Paul Bureau is one of those advocates and is executive director at Fair Canada, and he joins me now. Hi, Jean-Paul. Great to have you on.
Hi, Saijal. Thank you for having me.
So you were quoted as saying we are disappointed with Ontario's approach to approving credentials for financial advisors. Tell us why.
Well, I think you framed the issue very well in your opening comment. This was an opportunity to actually raise the bar and have people who are in the financial services industry that like to hold themselves out as financial advisors actually meet higher standards that are meeting the expectations of consumers. So the problem is there are a lot of people in the financial services who actually are licensed to sell you a product, not necessarily to provide you with comprehensive financial advice. So we're disappointed that in the process of protecting this title, the government and the regulators didn't do more to protect consumers.
Yeah, so let's talk about this process then, Jean-Paul, because earlier this year, my understanding is Ontario's Finance Ministry approved the financial professionals title protection rule. So what happened between then and now that's still leading to this gap?
Well, there are a number of issues with the enabling legislation and the rules, but the issue that's happened since is that FSRA, which is the regulatory agency that's empowered to designate or approve organizations that run these programs. So individuals have to take these programs to be able to use the titles.
Hmm.
The main issue is that the organizations that have been approved to have their titles used are really not that different than what exists today in terms of those who are out there providing different types of sales advice on different types of products. So it was a missed opportunity to actually get bodies in there or organizations in there that held their members to much higher standards.
So what would you have liked to have seen?
Well, I would have liked to have seen more clarity as to what exactly is a financial advisor and creating some agreed upon standards that are higher and different than somebody, for example, who's licensed to sell you a mutual fund. So where we're at today is the distinction between somebody who is a financial advisor in Ontario and somebody who's only licensed to sell you a mutual fund is not that different. So we would have liked to see a greater distinction between the role of a financial advisor, the competency, the educational requirements, the knowledge and the experience requirements to be quite different than somebody who's simply licensed to sell you one type of product.
Yeah, it's interesting because you would think, couldn't they come up with with another title. I don't know if it's financial salesperson. If all that person is doing is in a position is selling and is not in a position to advise.
Yeah. I think using the title salesperson for those people that are truly salespeople, I think that would be a step in the right direction. The industry, unfortunately, has resisted attempts to use that label. Um, it's a difficult challenge. I think the biggest thing should be to try to raise the proficiency requirements on the individuals that hold themselves out as providing financial advice. And as you noted, that suggests they're giving you comprehensive advice about a range of different products, a range of different financial strategies, not just trying to sell you one product.
It's so interesting, though, Jean Paul, because it just feels like they're not putting themselves in the position of Canadians who, for the most part, are not financially literate. I hear this all the time that they go to a bank and they're like, "Oh, my financial advisor said this," and I'm like, "Are they a financial advisor or are they not?" And honestly, they don't have a clue. So. I'm glad we're having this important discussion. We're going to take a quick break and we'll continue this when we come back. Welcome back. We've been talking about the term financial advisor and who's qualified as one technically and who isn't, because we know the range is quite broad. Jean Paul, I'm curious to know, are people in the industry being vocal about this and how are they feeling about it?
It's a great question, and it's important to know that there are a lot of people in the industry that are disappointed as well. It's not just consumer advocates. I think there are those in the industry that really care and focus on the client's needs, and they're working very hard to kind of professionalize the industry and provide the best quality advice they can to meet their clients' expectations. So there are quite a few people in the industry that are also disappointed.
Yeah, I think that's the point, right? Because one bad apple, and sometimes everyone else gets lumped in, and they shouldn't be.
Yeah, and it's like most businesses, you can either try to have a race to the top and increase the proficiency and the qualifications, or a race to the bottom. And I think those that really care about their clients are concerned that this may turn into a race to the bottom.
Hmm. Now, I know you and your fellow advocates believe that if provinces want a standard for financial planners, they should look to Quebec. Why?
Well, Quebec took a different approach, and there are a number of important differences. So, for example, in Quebec, there is only one body that can grant you that title. So in Ontario now, we have, I think, four different organizations that can grant, I think, eight different titles or nine
Wow.
different titles. So there's a greater streamlined process in Quebec. The other big difference is Quebec recognized that between financial planning and financial advising, the only recognized or the only title that actually has recognized global standards is financial planning. And so they limit their title protection rules to financial planners only. There is no agreed upon definition or standard or qualification of what makes a financial advisor. In fact, Quebec, under their regime, have taken the view that you cannot even use the word financial advisor because it's too confusing.
Oh, interesting stuff. You talked about these different organizations in Ontario, and Jean Paul, I have to ask, why isn't there a national standard across the board that's more streamlined? I've never understood this because it just confuses consumers.
Yeah, it's a great question. And there seems to be a disconnect in the sense that, in Ontario, it's been the policy of this government and the regulator to create, for example, a single self-regulatory organization. And the justification for doing that is to reduce burden, to simplify the system. And yet, at the same time, they've created a system where we now have 4 different credentialing bodies issuing 8 or 9 different credentials. So it doesn't really hang together. I think this would have been much better had there been a national effort to try to create a single standard for either just financial planners or financial planners and financial advisors. But it should have been done at the national level through, for example, the Canadian Insurance Regulators Association working together with the Canadian Securities Administrator group working together. But in this case, Ontario decided to go out alone on this initiative.
Okay. We only have about 40 seconds left until the end of the show. If regulators aren't protecting consumers, what's one tip that you give consumers to protect themselves?
Really ask questions to understand who you are dealing with. Try to ask questions about their qualifications, what they're licensed to sell you, what they're licensed not to sell you, and really try to understand. That'll help you get a good sense of the scope of the advice you're going to get.
Yeah, good tips there. We really appreciate you coming on. Thanks, Jean-Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Jean-Paul Bureau of Fair Canada. Well, that wraps up this episode of Strictly Money. If you have thoughts or questions about today's show, drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay well, stay wise, and stay well.